All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Old Guy REI. I'm really excited this evening because I get to chat with a good friend of mine and Cynthia's over the past few years. I think we met back in 2019 when we were trying to get restarted in real estate investing. And Ali is, well, I'll let you describe how you think of yourself, but I consider you like a turnkey promoter. And maybe you could tell us the difference between a promoter and a provider and
Yeah, sure.
what you're doing.
So it's nice to meet everybody. Was it 2019? When you said that, I was like, yeah, I think that probably was about it. It was a few years ago. And
Yeah.
we've been in touch tons on and off, which has been great because I've been able to follow your journey too, which has been really inspiring because I know you guys kind of went down with everything and then to build it back up, I think it's fantastic. And I'm super excited about all your videos. Like you're doing all the cool things. I'm like, oh, I'm so happy. I love it. Yeah, so I'm considered back in the day, there wasn't really an official term. People bounced around kind of promoter versus marketer. Now it's kind of just turnkey marketers. So the difference is that a turnkey provider is the direct provider of the turnkey property. So like if you buy a turnkey rental property, you're buying from the actual turnkey provider. They're the ones who own the property. They go out and find the property in the first place. They buy it, they rehab it, they place the tenants, get the property managers going, and then they sell the property to you. I don't own any of the properties that you end up working with. So my job is the marketer, and there's maybe, I don't know, what, like 5 or 6 companies that we all do the same thing basically. And so I'm one of a few, but basically what we all do is we run around looking for the good turnkey providers. And my experience with that I started as a turnkey buyer. I had no idea what I was doing. I ended up working with a turnkey marketing company myself, and they kind of taught me the ropes. And little did I know that I was going to end up becoming a turnkey marketer. That was not by plan. It was not planned. It was not in my, life business plan, so to speak, but it worked out a lot. I was so excited about turnkeys. I was telling anybody who would listen. So people suddenly were like, oh, who do you buy through? Who do you recommend? Who should I stay away from? And one thing led to another. So I started doing it just kind of inherently myself. And so the benefit of the turnkey marketer, which is different than the provider, is we are a little bit less biased as far as markets. So every turnkey provider that I work with, they're all in different markets, which offer completely different things. Different providers have different price ranges, single family versus multifamily. Maybe some are more appreciation based, some are more cash flow based. Like there's differences between every market. There's pros and cons to everything. So if you come to me as an investor, instead of you coming to me as a provider and you're like, oh, what's the best market I should invest in? Well, I would tell you mine because it's the only place I work, right? Versus when you come to a marketer, we can be a little bit more biased. As I just said, we're not biased. We can be a little less biased in terms of like what's going to be the best fit for you. Because what might be the best fit for you is not necessarily the best fit for someone else. So we can really kind of suss that out and then place you with different turnkey providers. And then the other benefit with it, because I've been in turnkey world for so long, I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And so what I do is I go boots on the ground with the turnkey providers. Because if you're a brand new turnkey investor, we could give you a list of questions to ask turnkey providers all day long so you can go vet them. But when you're new, you don't really know how to interpret those answers, even if you know what questions to ask, right? So what I try and do and what the marketers in general kind of do, because we have the experience with the providers and we know what we're looking for and we know oftentimes what leads to good or bad experiences, we go try and find the good turnkey providers on your behalf and then kind of report back. And I never make I can't make a claim of saying, yes, if you go with this provider, everything will be perfect. But I can say, hey, I really like what I'm seeing over here. I've had a really good experience with this guy. A lot of buyers have had really good experiences. Go check it out. At which point I would introduce you to the provider. So it's essentially a middleman position, but it does give you a lot more options and, to help figure out markets, help decide between providers, get a heck of a lot of moral support. The turnkey providers really are pretty busy. They're not really hand holders. They don't have as much time on that front. Whereas that's my job. So you basically get me for free to help you pick markets, but then also hold your hand if you want it through the buying process. So that's kind of the difference between the providers and the marketers in general.
Yeah, there's a lot of information there. And I know over the years, we've been fortunate to have you have our backs because, you know, we, through this journey and all these videos, the story will come out of when we were first looking at turnkeys, and you've had the experience of certain providers just disappearing on you, things like that, even
Mhm.
after you've gone out to vet them.
Well,
When you're being
you know my favorite running line is when turnkey providers go psychotic overnight, and property managers, they're right in the same thing, but yeah, they can literally just go whoosh, either disappear, ghost you, or go psychotic overnight. It's like, oh my God. I know
yeah,
you've had plenty of those stories, which is so fun.
right. I think it's helped us build a great relationship with each other. And I always tell everyone, even when I told them we were going to chat and record a video together, that I'm not out there to sell turnkeys, right? But I would like the information to get out there because it seems like the turnkey model has had a bad rap in the past years, and it won't work for everybody. It has worked for us a couple of times now, and at least if you have, like, I know a few people in your circle and my circle. Fabian is one, Marcus is another, that have purchased turnkeys and have had experiences. I think they've been pretty good for both of them, and that helps a little bit, but it's not a guarantee, right, that
Yeah.
it's going to work for everyone. But and I know you and I just talked about one the other day in the Detroit market that I ran numbers the way I run them, because it seems like most of the pro formas that the turnkey providers put out, they sometimes they don't include things like capex and maintenance for the first year because they think the property's renovated, so you shouldn't have any of those issues the first year. Sometimes I've double checked insurance and taxes just to verify, because I've heard things about when you buy a property, turnkey or not, you're taxed at the new sale price, and some people are putting in the amount of taxes that were paid before the property changed hands and things like that. So just verifying all those things for yourself for sure. And I spoke with Al, and I liked him, and I like the fact that he has in-house property management. He seems to be have
He
built.
didn't have in-house, he has third party.
Are they third party?
Mhm.
I'm sorry, it sounded
But
like
they're
he.
a heck of a lot better than his in-house property manager was.
Well, that's good to know. Something I didn't know, but also that he's building roofing companies and uh, different like carpentry divisions and things like that. It sounds like, so to have all that kind of under one roof is nice in most cases, like you said. But also, so our friend in St. Louis, he's he's been willing to take on some property management for some of his former clients or existing clients, people that are buying from him now. And I like the communication part uh, between he and I can shoot him a text and he always gets back to me, even though we know how busy they are. And that's one of the nice things that I've appreciated over the years. A lot of them, like you said, they're so busy doing their thing, finding properties and rehabbing properties and things like that, that they don't have that type of customer service in their in their in their business yet, I guess. But some of the some of the recent experiences that we've had with looking for turnkeys with a few different providers are, things have come up, like you and I talked the other day about a property being in a flood zone that we didn't know about, and how that can knock your cash flow out if you're going to have to get flood insurance. And honestly, you said, why would you buy a property in a flood zone if you have a choice to buy another property that's not? So a lot of different things that when you're doing your due diligence, when we buy turnkeys, we're getting our own home inspection, we're getting sewer scopes and things like that. Again, even though the one that I know of does, they do a jetting and a video of this sewer laterals when they buy the properties. Um, and they've offered to, share that video with us to help us feel more comfortable buying. Right now, we have the one in Illinois. We have one in Gary that we bought through Olson the Olson Group. And then we have the first one we bought, which was the triplex in St. Joseph with Ben and his team.
That one had some stories.
Yeah, we're we
Welcome
still
to
got
Turnkey
those.
World. Put a helmet on.
Yeah, yeah. We actually, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about that one, but we did some extensive rehabbing on that one that just finished up. And we can get into that more later, but the overall experience, that property manager, Frank Lewis, is our property manager there who we love. And then his mentor was in St. Louis, and his name is Nathan Cross. And Nathan Cross was the mentor for Frank Lewis. And that's how we got hooked up. So we were looking for properties in St. Louis because we love Frank. And if the model was the same, we would love to have someone to manage our properties there. And so far, it's been a great match.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I want to, before you keep going, I want to pull something out. You said it, but I want to really put like I want to really kind of pull it out and name it, because I think it's one of the most important things in turnkey world is you started talking about the pro formas. So when the provider gives you the pro forma, which, yeah, there's some pretty shoddy looking pro formas that come out. Some of the providers that I work with, when they give me their pro formas, they're missing key things. Like they don't put maintenance and vacancy at all. And so I always dump them into my pro formas. So there's definitely a wide variety of pro formas and quality of pro formas that come out. But what I'm going to say now is going to lead to a bigger point that I really want to showcase is like with a pro forma to defend the turnkey provider. One thing I learned along my turnkey journey is with turnkeys, it's so easy for people to get kind of, what's the word? Like wrapped up into this idea of everything is done for you, which in theory, yes, for the most part, everything is kind of done for you and kind of should be done for you. But what I've really seen happen over the years is people take that to an extreme where they just kick back and they're like, cool, yeah, I'll take it, I buy it. And then they're never proactive about anything. They never verify any of the numbers on the pro forma, all of that. And I've talked to some providers and they have a really solid stance about it, in my opinion, is that it's not their job as the investor to forecast what's going to happen, like in terms of the property tax, in terms of getting insurance quotes. So the providers have their own insurance companies. So none of the numbers that they put in the pro forma, depending on who you're working with, I guess, are inaccurate. They're all accurate for the current status of the property. It's not their job to do the forecast for you as the investor. So your job, a due diligence item, would be like, okay, what is going to happen to my property taxes after I buy it? Okay, I'm going to put that number in. Okay, I'm going to call my insurance provider and make sure, see what that number is going to be. And it really, like, part of me wants to say, I wish that the providers would do all that for you, because it would just be great and it would seem like it's giving you a more accurate pro forma, which it would. But on the same token, because I've seen so many people just completely drop the ball on doing anything as a responsible investor, I almost don't want the turnkey providers to do that, because I want people to understand that it is your job as the investor, no matter who's doing what on your property, no matter where you get a property from, no matter anything, it's your investment. And it should be your job to do exactly. Frank, you sent me a video that was amazing about your analysis. What numbers are you changing? What are you changing them to? What are you looking for? And that's what every single investor needs to be doing. So like in CapEx, I agree more with the providers, because if CapEx doesn't happen for 10 years, by the time you've used all those maintenance estimates, and then by the time inflation and appreciation kicks in, it almost becomes a moot point. But to your point, it's what you as an investor are comfortable with. So you should put whatever numbers you're comfortable with. But all of that to lead to the bigger point that quite a few things you just said really lend a hand to is you're the investor. It's your job and your responsibility to verify everything you're given. Because if you don't, you can't come back. I've worked, unfortunately, with quite a few buyers who do nothing. Like there was a big something on a Birmingham property one time, and the investor was all up in arms. And I totally understood, because it was really frustrating. It was gonna be a big expense. And I said, hey, can you pull up, did you look in your property inspection when you originally bought the house to see if that thing was called out? I don't know if it was like a foundation issue or something. And he specifically said, he was like, oh, I got a property inspection, but I never actually opened it. Oh, really? And then I recently had an investor who I never would have expected. He was complaining about a problem. I said, "Hey, what'd your property inspection, did it call any of that out when you were purchasing?" He goes, "I didn't get a property inspection." Okay, and in both of these cases, they immediately, all they were willing to do was blame the turnkey provider. And that's not fair. Like, you are the investor, you've got to put your big boy or big girl pants on and do everything. And so you said quite a few things after the pro forma thing that kind of fit all in that category. I don't remember what you said, but I really want to highlight that, because if you can have that mentality when you're buying turnkeys, world's at your fingertips. That's when you become successful. That's when you have better chances of success, better experiences, all that kind of stuff. So after about, I've been doing this for like 13 years, after being a little jaded for 13 years of this being a regular thing, I just wanted to highlight that. I
No,
will say, I do think people are doing a lot better with it these days, because the investing environment we're working in is forcing people to act like investors versus the consumers pretending to be investors. So it's less of a thing today, but you made such good points. I wanted to cap it and say, here's what that translates to.
yeah, it's great to have your point of view on it, and it's nice that I think I've come a long way. Cynthia and I have come a long way as far as analyzing properties, and she keeps me in line with, she likes to see a couple $100 a door, actual positive after all expenses, and a 10% cash on cash return. And I just had that conversation with Al and John, and going back to, not just turnkeys, but any property, because we've purchased off the MLS in St. Louis, and that property is like our best performing property. And I think so whoever I talk to about turnkeys or what we're doing, you know, I think you had a conversation with my friend Chester,
Mhm.
and he and I spent 3 hours the other weekend going through the turnkeys and analyzing them the way I do. And although they were not, when I put my numbers in, they weren't like 10% or anything, but they were more than he sees in where he's been doing his research in his markets. So he
Mhm.
was pleasantly surprised because he was feeling defeated because nothing was cash flowing where he was looking.
Yeah.
But to see that there are some markets that can potentially cash flow, and one of the things I always try to stress is that, like for us, having the purchase points that we're looking at, 70, 80, 90, 150,000, I'll take 80, for example. If you're going to buy a property and you're going to put 20 to 30,000 down, to me, it's worth putting it in a property versus letting it sit in even a high yield savings account, right?
100%.
Because
Even if you're only getting $50 a month cash flow, it's worth it. It's better than letting it sit.
yeah, and all the other benefits that you always talk about, appreciation and mortgage pay down and depreciation and things like that. So, and also, even for me, if the deal just took a dump and we lost all of that, $30,000 isn't going to kill us, right?
Mhm.
But where some of our friends invest and they're buying, say, duplexes for 600,000 or 700,000, you got to put in
Oof.
100 to 150 down. If you lose that, then it's really going to sting.
Yeah.
But also to not to just have somebody go and buy a cheap property, because there are cheap and there are less expensive markets. I don't think we buy cheap properties. They
No.
are in C areas, but they're not bad.
Yeah.
Um, and everything you could learn just from picking a property up like that, if you're going to use property management, dealing with property managers, the small things come up. Our friends in the whole group always talk about the first 5 years sucking, and it deters
Ah,
them.
I would like for that to not be true. If you buy
It's
in
gonna,
LA where I live, 100% they're gonna suck. But like, I would like to think some out of state stuff does not have to. I like for it to not suck at all.
no,
That's my
and
philosophy.
yeah, and like I was saying, so the Gary turnkey we bought, the MLS we bought in St. Louis, those have been perfect, right? So the first 5 years on those is going to be excellent. The other ones we've had challenges on. The Illinois property, we were going to be going through an eviction. we just found out some good news about that tenant getting help, and Section 8 is now going to cover 100% of their rent. So they're
Nice.
going to stay. Yeah, so they're going to stay. One of the things I like to talk about in those cases is that even though it's a negative experience, or maybe in your mind it's a super negative experience, good things can still come out of it, right? Because all the months she was behind, she was only paying like $60 of the rent. Section 8 was sending us the check for the rest. So we were still having great cash flow on it because of the Section 8 portion.
Mhm.
So I think, and a lot of our other mentors and things talk about the education, putting in 30,000 for almost like $1 million education, right? But if you never get in, you're not going to learn those things. And even if you study for years, these things are still going to happen. So, why not learn them in the beginning of the journey instead, and help you move forward with everything else that you learn?
Well, and I think it's important. Well, I don't think, I know for sure it's important. It was really important for me to know in the beginning too. And it's not to say, like, I would like to think the majority of turnkeys and any property do not have big challenges in the first couple of years. That is more of a fluke. But if that happens, or if it happens at any point, when COVID hit, a lot of people lost 10 grand between rents and, eviction moratoriums and all that kind of stuff. And the resounding question I would hear is, well, should I sell the property? And I also had experiences when I started buying turnkeys. I had quite a few big expense items come up in the very beginning. Again, this is not to say that this is a norm and you should expect it, but if it happens, the reality that everybody needs to understand with a rental property is rental properties are long-term investments. I know for me, when the expensive things happen in the beginning, because it's almost like growing pains. At the time, I had bad property managers. You with the triplex, like some different weird things happened. And I don't know, you can speak for yours, but when I look back at mine, I've had those properties now for somewhere between 12 and 13 years, I guess. And looking back, those big expenses that were huge at the time, and I was like, oh my God, why am I in real estate? This is terrible. Like, it's costing me a fortune. I'm having to pay the mortgage while this is, it's vacant and all these things. It is like a blip on the radar. None of that has made a dent in how profitable those properties have been, because I won't dive into the details, but rental properties make money in 5 different ways. And over time, those 5 different income streams start compounding with each other. So it's not 5 linear profit streams. They start compounding and it just increases exponentially. When that happens, those big expenses really don't hold a candle to what you end up with potentially profit wise. But the key is you have to hang on to the property for that to happen. It doesn't mean you should hang on to every property. There might be properties that are worth getting rid of, but those little blips on the radar, which feel huge at the time, it oftentimes, if not most of the time, becomes a non-factor when it comes to the bottom line later if you give it enough time. So I just kind of want to highlight that of, don't jump ship or think you need to jump ship just because something happens. It's also a really good reason to make sure you have a nest egg. If you only have $30,000 to your name, try to find a $20,000 property and have, after closing costs, or $20,000 that you can put in after a few closing costs, have 7 grand in an emergency fund. You want to be able to cover mortgages if a vacancy happens, if an eviction happens, whatever happens, because as long as you have that emergency fund, because if you own rental properties long enough, you will have unexpected expenses. End of story. If you didn't, or if there's any guarantee of it, everybody would do this, right? Like, you made a really good point. The only way to learn this, because it's an on-the-job training kind of industry, is you have to dive in. Now, don't dive in too soon, like, learn a few things beforehand, but you have to be in it to learn it. But learning it is going to cost you some money on occasion. So have that emergency fund set aside. And when the big things happen, it won't be as stressful, because you're like, here's my rainy day fund. No problem. I'll pay for that. Lesson learned. How can I make that better next time? Versus thinking nothing's ever going to happen and be like, oh my God, what do I do? And then it's a big panic fest, all for potentially no reason. Because I do the thing oftentimes, like, our brains we're wired to jump into fight or flight, like the tigers chasing us back in the caveman days. So if this thing on our rental property happens, we think we're gonna die. Like biologically, we think we're gonna die. And so quite often I'd be like, hang on, am I gonna die? No. And like you said, worst case scenario, worst case. And this is probably far-fetched too, is I lose 30 grand. But guess what? I didn't die. So it's like our brain, we have to acknowledge that our brains react like we are going to die because it's biologically how we're wired. But when you can reel that in, that's part of being an investor. Being an investor means you reel that in. You can have your panic fest, but like then chill out and then regroup and do something about it. But then also it is a perseverance thing because things are going to go wrong and you have to be willing to learn from it and keep going. I almost wanted to drop out of real estate a million times because it's like, oh, that's not going well. Fortunately, I had a mentor to keep me in the game. Now I see what the value of that was. So that's, you know, just going forward. It's just really like stay cool, reel in the emotions, talk to Frank, talk to me, talk to somebody, a mentor, a buddy, an investing buddy, and be like, oh my God, what do I do? Because when we're in it, we can't see the forest through the trees, and somebody on the outside can help us. And Frank, you're doing an amazing job of this, is while we are all investing ourselves, it's so valuable, I think, to bring people together, to be like, Frank, dude, here's what happened to my property. Like, what do you recommend? Because I'm in my emotions. You are an outside party and be like, hey, I mean, when I call, I'm like, Frank, I have a rehab problem. And you're like, oh, it's easy. Just fix it with this. I'm like, oh, well, that was easy. And there is a lot of value in having that network of people to use them. And my advice is to use them. Call Frank.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. First of all, the reserve thing, because, you know, Cynthia, her reserve amount per door was like $10,000. So
Per
we
door. That's
per
impressive.
door. Yeah.
Per door.
So, and, you know, going through, so on the triplex, we're spending $30,000. It's
Oh,
10,000 a door, but we're updating heating and LVP and kitchen cabinetry and everything because in that market, the house was in good shape, nice, but it was old. And we were seeing that it was having trouble keeping up with other rentals in the area that might be newer, you know, nicer finishes and things like that. So we're putting the money into it. One of my thoughts was, should we sell it? You know, Cynthia brought me back down to earth and said, hey, we already have it. Just fix it up and see how it works after all the fixes are done. And so we're looking forward to that. They have finished the work and they have it marketed for rent. And honestly, the rents have come up a couple $100 a month per unit since we bought it. So that will help, you know, refilling the reserve accounts, of course. And then, yeah, like you said, it's easier for us not to panic since we've been at it for a few years. But there's people in the group like us who have gone through quite a few things. And I think it helps newbies, for lack of a better term, realize that this can work for them if because we laugh. Like today, I got a call. They finished the rehab. One of the tenants had complained that there was an odor. They couldn't find the odor. So the guys opened up the wall and one of the sewer pipes was cracked.
oof.
So, you know, so that's a $1,500, here's your invoice. So we giggle at stuff like that now, but somebody maybe just bought that building and this comes up, they're like, you know, the world's ending. But and that's one thing I've been able to help people with too. You know, we've had a few people bring me their inspection reports and they don't understand a lot of the stuff that's in it. And I've seen it quite a few of those. So just help them go through that and realize this 60 pages is, you know, they're thinking there's 60 pages of stuff that's wrong. I'm not going to buy this property, things like that. But if you can help them through that, then they can see it better.
Well, and if you're buying it through a turnkey provider, never ever bail when you get the inspection report. The inspection report is a milestone. You give that to the provider, they repair anything that's called out on that inspection report. And then depending on whether they do that or to what degree they do that, then you make the decision if you want to bail. If you bail right at the time of it is completely normal for an inspection report to come back and look really intimidating, be like, oh my God, I'm buying a turnkey rental property and this isn't turnkey, like, da, 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 da. Why didn't they put that out? Like, it's completely normal. And you had, well, you don't have to do anything, but if you bail right then, you're potentially missing out on a really good deal because you want to give the provider, and they're expecting it, give them a chance to repair those things, at which point then you make the decision. So just a little plug there.
Yeah, and we've had good luck doing that, like you said, we get our inspection report back. And of course, that's what you think, right? This is supposed to be turnkey. Why does this report have all this stuff on it?
Like,
Most of
this
the
thing is
time,
so obvious. Why would they not have gotten that?
yeah,
Well, they're doing a lot of just, they're human. Just
and a lot of different properties, yeah, multiple properties too. So
how long have you walked around your own house and completely not noticed something that later is like, how did I not ever notice that? Like, it's just, it's normal. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it's normal.
yeah, and like you said, we have had great luck, going over the report together, and they're fixing all the extra stuff. Um, we did have one in the past that it was in Independence. I forget who the provider was. Nobody that we're working with now, but it took forever. That was like a horrible winter. So winter was prolonging the project, and by the time they finally got it done, then they realized it was either the sewer lateral or the main water line coming into the house had to be replaced. So they told us they couldn't sell it as a turnkey anymore. They had to put it on the regular market to get their money back. So we
Mm,
waited a long time. We waited like 6 months for that one. And things
yeah.
happen, but it used to be, I used to think that if we missed on a deal, that's the end. There's never going to be another deal out there. But, again, time has proven that there's always another deal around the corner, even with interest rates the way they are now.